Today they are stuck. They are paralyzed. They're making progress, but it's an embryo, and who knows where it would lead. So, you know, Petraeus kept saying, we've got to get this going and then start the building and the government and, you know, turn it all over to the Iraqis. And that has started to happen, but there's certainly a long way to go. Scott?
And I'm going to just add, like, from my personal experience on that front, and I'm not really sure if it really answers your question, but it does get at at least some Sunni-Shia relationships that I would talk to Sheikh Sattar about, or some of the other tribal sheikhs I dealt with. Sheikh Sattar would frequently meet, I shouldn't say frequently, would meet with tribal leaders from the Shia communities down in the south or throughout other parts of the country. They did have desire, the Sunnis did have desire for national unity. You know, during that time, people were talking about, do we break the country up into 3 parts? You know, what do we do? The Sunni-Shia divide there. They did meet with his tribal counterparts, if you will, in the Shia community from other parts of the country, sometimes there, sometimes in Baghdad. They'd have mutual meetings and meet up in the Baghdad area. So there was some communication at that tribal level between the Sheikh Sattars and Sheikh Ahmed, his brother, with some of the other Shia tribal leaders.
And Travis Patriquin was not averse to playing hardball politics with all this. I mean, he said in a paper to his colleagues when they moved into Ramadi, he said, listen, we should position ourselves as the Ready First combat team that beat the Sadr militia a year or 2 earlier. We beat them. That's how tough we are. Let's tell the Sunnis that. It'll enlarge our wasta, our influence, and we will be players all of a sudden versus some of the groups that preceded us. This is all perception. And he saw that as a great asset. He said, as long as we're studying second and third order effects, let's exploit that reputation. And Sattar, I called him earlier a Tony Soprano of Western Iraq. A real rough character. Did he kill anybody but with his own hands? I don't know. But a heck of a rough reputation. But he was a statesman. He evolved quite unexpectedly into a powerful, statesman-like, kind of like a rocket in Iraqi politics. Now, he died in an IED explosion in September of 2007, but that was a long enough period for all this to start happening. And Sattar was very adamant about reaching out to all Iraqis, and his vision was of a truly pluralistic, functioning Iraq that could stand up to Iran and stand up to Syria and stand up to anybody and be, you know, a real democracy. An amazing character, right out of the movies, right out of Hollywood. Yes, sir.
How much do you think that the awakening was a backlash from the Sunnis against Al-Qaeda? And how much do you think that the Sunni sheiks needed us as much as we needed them?
How much was the awakening a backlash against Al-Qaeda, and how much did we need the Sunni sheiks versus how much did they need us?
Well, it was definitely a Sunni backlash against Al-Qaeda. Had Al-Qaeda not done the mistakes that it done and used a murder intimidation campaign against the Sunnis, and especially the Sunni resistance fighters, okay, you'd probably still have an insurgency today. I mean, the U.S. had tried, the Marines had tried. I mean, it's not like, you know, it's a novel idea to talk with tribal leaders or to try to reach out or to win hearts and minds. I mean, from the very beginning, the U.S. was trying to do that. But, you know, the political will just wasn't there. I mean, even in 2004, the Marines, you know, the tribal people and people that fought against the Americans said, look, we made a mistake. You know, kind of some of the cream of the crop said, we shouldn't have worked with Al-Qaeda and let them come in. It was a big mistake. We need to get rid of them. But there wasn't really the political will on the American side at the higher level to work with former regime elements or work with tribal leaders. And so from a division, you know, the Marine MEF, you know, they couldn't do this type of thing. They had to support a provincial council, okay, that was supposedly elected, you know, by 1 or 2% of the population. They had to support it. They couldn't support a guy that's lower level person on the grassroots and undermine the provincial council. I think it was a blessing in disguise that you had an Army brigade in a Marine area, because a Marine commander is not going to tell an Army brigade commander, I don't like what you're doing, you're undermining me. He has to be very cordial and say, okay, I might not agree because you're undermining what I'm doing a little bit, but I'm going to let you do. And a brigade has a lot more, you know, leeway what they can do. Had it been an Army division and an Army brigade, you probably had the division commander calling up the brigade commander and saying, hey, you cut this out, I don't like it. Or if it had been a Marine regiment, could have been that. But I think definitely, had al-Qaeda not made these mistakes, the Sunnis wouldn't have gone totally against them like this. But at the same time, they couldn't have done it without the Americans' help. And not just any Americans' help. You had to have trust on a brigade level. It was just the time. I mean, you could have had other brigades. Let's say there wasn't a Travis Patriquin, okay, that didn't go to Ramadi. You know, if you didn't have a brigade there that felt that this outreach, okay, and we're going to take the risk of relying on these shady people, okay, they had tried. There was an interesting thing that happened right when we got there, and we didn't know what was going on, and you brought up the CIA, and I've tried to get to the bottom of this, but I haven't yet. But I've gotten very close. We arrive in Ramadi in June 2006, May 2006, and after a couple of weeks, we see dead bodies in the streets with signs saying, "This is what happens to you when you fight against the people of Anbar," signed the Anbar revolutionaries. So you had these vigilantes going out and killing people, al-Qaeda people that were on our targeting list, and we didn't know who was doing it. And since Travis, he was key in this since he was a captain and he used to work in special forces, he was close with the intelligence agencies, with U.S. intelligence agencies, and trying to find out what the situation was. And then at the same time, he would work with the brigade. And we didn't know who was doing this, okay? These were vigilantes. Now, after the fact, we learned, and I've talked with these people, as they said, look, well, when we found out that you guys were coming, first of all, we had to preserve ourselves. But when we found out you were coming to Ramadi, we thought, hey, if we start doing this, you're going to want to be our friends. And these happened to be the first people that were recruited in the police force, which we didn't really know about at the time, okay? But had you had these types of vigilantes killing al-Qaeda, they've been doing that in 2005 and 2004. Al-Qaeda just comes back and decapitates them. But since these guys had a brigade, and the brigade was doing everything through the Ministry of Interior, okay, this was all government of Iraq sponsored, okay, you had a lot of credibility, you had a lot of support, and the public, which had already been against al-Qaeda, okay, supported at the time. So it was the right mix, I think.
Yeah, and I think another thing is you hit the nail right on the head. It was we needed them and they needed us. And I think, Sterling, I think you said this earlier, you also had the right people. People are everything. Talent is everything, and Travis had it. Colonel McFarland had. I mean, the stars could not have aligned any better for that point in time. And the Iraqis, as much as we needed them, they needed us. And Travis was perfect, being that civil affairs. He's a special forces guy. He spoke Arabic, but he also civil affairs. And the primary job of civil affairs is get out in the community, talk to the people, understand. Ramadi was a mess. Everything needed reconstructed. I mean, everything needed constructed. It was just torn down. Dresden, Stalingrad, a perfect example. I couldn't believe my first time walking downtown. I thought this must be what World War II looked like. I mean, buildings leaning over. Every building had bullet holes in it. So I think Travis understood that as well, and understood how we could. I don't like to use the word exploit, but it was a mutual thing where we needed each other. He knew how to get at that.
And Patriquin was embroiled in some inter-office combat, I would call it. For a brief time, there were a couple of staff people at headquarters in Fallujah who were saying, "Don't talk to Sattar. He's a killer. He's a gangster. He's got blood on his hands." And his response was, "We can't. There's nobody else for us to talk to." And this guy's delivering on his word. And Travis Patriquin's mother said to me recently, one of the keys to his personality was he didn't follow orders all the time. And he knew what he was doing was the right thing and that it would pay off. He gambled. And so did his brigade commander, Sean McFarland, you mentioned earlier. He's now a general. A very enlightened, very smart man who just let Travis run with this tribal affairs thing, this project. And to everybody's great credit, it turned out as well as anybody could have dreamed, I think, at the time.
Yeah, Travis did. I remember meeting Travis the first time, and it was, oh God, it felt like 125 degrees, and we're in a tent, and my battalion was across the river, so I'd gone over, and we're in a tent, and Travis walks in, same thing, bushy mind, I'm like, who's this guy? And so we start talking, and you could get the sense of, okay, this guy's going to have my back. Because it's important at the battalion level, the brigade has to have your back, because you kind of know, in being a Marine battalion, working for a Marine MEF, I would have my Marine ties, and I would get a sense sometimes where, ooh, there may be some differences here in opinion, but you knew Travis had your back, and then you know also if Travis had your back, Colonel McFarland probably had your back as well. So there was definitely some politics in there as well, and you had to trust your heart and your gut, and knew that those guys would have your back.
That's the reason I wrote this book, is that guys like Sterling and Scott and Travis, I never get to see them in action. I've never served in the military. You know, we might pass each other on the street. I'll see somebody in a uniform. But nobody in my family is in the war, involved in the wars at this time. But when I see somebody like Travis Patriquin, I get a window into what these young men and women are doing every day, how funny they are, how smart they are, how well they live their lives. And you know what it does to me? It makes me really proud to be an American, to see them in action. I'm not a guy who runs around talking about how proud I am to be an American. It's just I'm shy that way, you know. It's just, I am, but I don't run around talking about it. But my God, when I see these people, what they do every day, that's what happens. And that's why these stories to me are so precious. Yes, ma'am. Great. I really want to thank Scott and Sterling, and I want to thank the families of Vincent Pomante and Travis Patriquin for being here today. We really, really appreciate it. Thank you.